on my screen.
There should be a little orange or reddish colored arrow you can click on and it'll minimize it.
There you go. All right.
Sorry, we should have covered that. You're all set now.
Now, how do I move the little box?
Just drag it.
Yeah, I'm trying to drag. There we go. Okay, super. Well, welcome to Mitchell's Anger and Conflict Etiquette training. I'm the guy that teaches people how to be pissed off properly. This is a seminar, a webinar on basics of anger management. I strongly encourage you to take down this information about my website, www.angeretiquette.com, because I have a plethora of information available that I will not be covering on this webinar for you. I teach many things in my 33 years of experience of working in a correctional mental health facility and 20 plus years working as a private practice. I've gained and learned some experiences, and I just can't share it all with you in this brief time we're together. So I strongly encourage you to look at that if you have any interest in other topics like criminal thinking or dealing with difficult people and rational thinking, things like that. Okay, with that said, we're gonna move on with the presentation here. My mission statement is pretty simple, is to teach effective anger management etiquettes or tools and techniques that will enable clients to manage anger appropriately so they'll no longer hurt themselves or others. So the primary basis of anger management is stop the pain, stop the hurt that anger has created in so many people. Now, you probably already know what anger management is, but here's an FYI on what the experts say that anger management is. Anger is a natural, though sometimes unwanted or irrational, emotion that everybody experiences from time to time. Anger experts describe the emotion as a primary natural emotion, which has evolved as a way of surviving and protecting yourself from what is considered a wrongdoing. And this goes way back to the caveman times, okay? Anger can be expressed by shouting, yelling, or swearing, but in extreme cases, it can escalate into physical aggression towards objects or people. And in some cases, anger might look much more subtle, more of a brooding, silent anger or withdrawal. These are the type of people I've been dealing with for the last 30-some years. In a controlled manner, some anger can be helpful, motivating us to make positive changes or to take constructive action without something we feel is important. But when anger is very intense or very frequent, then it becomes harmful in many ways. Therefore, it's okay to be A. Okay to be A is an acronym I use. I use a lot of metaphors and acronyms in my teachings with people because it just seems they latch onto those things here. It's okay to be angry. It's what you do with it that creates or resolves the situation. Anger can be helpful in many ways, and in fact, anger often gets a bad rap, okay? We always think about the bad parts of anger, but we never think about some of the productive things that happen with anger. And so we dwell a lot on the negative aspects of anger. If you think of a couple of situations that you got angry about something and you became proactive and you overcame that, you know, the civil rights movement, a lot of movements that have happened, a lot of wars that have happened, you know, technically a war is not good to have, but it did produce good results in getting more peace and harmony, so forth throughout the world. So it's okay to be angry. It's what you do with it. You can create more anger or you can resolve it. Anger is a pushing away emotion. Anger pushes away those who are closest to us. The more pushing results in more distance from each other. This program deals with the most frequent episodes of anger to the least frequent episodes. So what I'm dealing primarily with are those constant day in and day out regular episodes of anger that happen that if we don't deal with them, they add up and they end up in a big explosive volcanic type of eruption. So we deal with the daily typical things that happen. Often I get questions about, well, what if this, what if some guy just comes up to me and smacks me in the face? And I said, well, what are the odds of that happening? You know, let's deal with somebody being rude to you or crude in a way, and because the odds of that are happening. So I deal with the things that most frequently happen. Think about it. When is the last time you got pissed off at a complete stranger, opposed to someone you know, besides a driving situation? Think about it. The last time you got irritated, annoyed, frustrated, disappointed was 99% of the time with somebody you know or you're closest to. And the more we abuse the anger, the more we push these people away. Therefore, anger management is the process of teaching ourselves alternative or other things to think and say when angry or upset. There are several definitions of anger management out there. I teach this definition and require my clients to memorize it as an anger management tool. It's a simple, direct, and effective self-talk statement because anger management is all about what you say to yourself when a trigger or provocation occurs. And this is where I had the link here. This link, if you didn't get to watch the video of Dr. Shad Helmstetter, I prefaced my whole program, my whole career basically on when I met this man and read his books and listened to his tapes and stuff. I became a firm believer that self-talk starts everything out, and any of people that are involved in any type of cognitive program, cognitive interventions or crisis prevention, stuff like that, everything starts with a thought. So I go way back to the beginning is, let's start with the thought that happens, and that starts with self-talk. And if you saw the video on the story of self-talk, you understand how we were programmed to be who we are, what we are today, okay? And then he used that little keyboard there to use that in the CD-ROM that he used is a tool to help us, aid in helping us understand that. So it's very important to understand that anger management is a process of teaching myself alternative or other things to think and say myself and upset. That's the premise of my program and of teaching anger management. So tip number one for you is to use positive self-talk. Now, that's easier said than done. We have a lot of negative self-talk, but I'm going to show you later on in a presentation how we cancel that out and replace it with something else. Self-talk statements, pick 3 and memorize. This is the title of a handout I give my clients, and I give them actually, it's the first tool I teach to have my clients memorize 3 simple self-talk statements. I give them a list of 47 to pick from and require them to memorize 3 for starters. This is a sampling of the list that I use. It's only a few that of my 47 I use here, but they got to memorize these. They get tested on this weekly, and I even bombard them when they check in with me. I say, okay, what are your self-talk statements? And they got to say them like lickety-split, because we got to impress upon them the importance of this. So a popular one is breathe, getting upset won't help. What am I telling myself about the situation? Fix the problem, not the blame. Attack the issues, not the person. The greatest remedy for anger is delay. Seneca said that. That's a quotation. I should actually have quotation marks around that. I'm responsible, I'm responsible, I'm responsible. This is one I use quite a bit. When I refer to I'm responsible, means I'm responsible for the stuff that comes out of my mouth and the actions I do. So I'm just giving myself a heads up. Hey, watch out. I'm responsible for what comes out of my mouth. I can handle this. I know I can control myself. Stay calm. Just continue to relax. As long as I keep my cool, I'm under control. I'm not going to let him or her get to me. I choose to be angry. No one makes me angry. I can spend several hours just on that one right there. 12, I don't have to have my own way. Others don't have to treat me fair. There's no need for an argument. Is my anger helping me or hurting me? I start every session with a quiz, a written quiz, that after they pick this, after my second session, as part of their homework, and they got to write them out. So 3-4 sessions, I'll give them a quiz on it, and they got to write it out. Then I bombard them. I impress upon them that it's very important that we understand the process of self-talk and what it does for us, because it's a self-talk that's got us into trouble. So this is a whole program. This is a whole program about teaching people how to deal with their anger the best way possible. So tip number 2 is the best way to deal with anger. And the very best way to deal with anger is to resolve in advance. You have that you will not get upset with anyone or anything for any reason. So resolve in advance. What do we mean? What do we do about this? How do we do this? Well, the first thing you got to do is you got to know your triggers or thoughts about them. Triggers, provocations. The most important thing that we got to do as human beings is understand what are the things that piss us off, that get us upset, that get us annoyed, frustrated, irritated, and so forth. Basically, anger is a secondary emotion. Disappointment, hurt, harassment, irritations, those things happen first, and then we use anger as a way to deliver our interpretation of the event to people. So the better you know the things that set us off, the sooner, easier, quicker you can fix the problem. So how we do that is we begin by practicing visualization. I teach my clients how to do some basic visualization. Teaching visualization is really easy. All you really need to do is close your eyes for a second, and as you close your eyes, picture yourself walking into your home. What is on the right wall in your home? What is on the far wall? What is on the left wall? Where's your furniture situated? What color is it? If you can picture that, you can visualize. So then what I have people do is I teach them that to visualize a triggering situation and then go through that, and then we go through the tools and techniques I teach them and how to resolve that. But this is something that you got to practice some more until you get it. You just got to practice, practice, practice until you get all this information down pat. Now, tip 3, know your triggers and provocations, okay? So the best way to deal with your anger is your second tip. First tip is to know your self-talk. So in order to resolve in advance that you will not get upset with yourself or others is to recognize and remember what things that trigger or provoke your anger is. So ask yourself, what am I telling myself about the situation? Now, asking that is a evolved brain question. I teach a little a technique from a trainer I got my certification from. It's called primitive brain, evolved brain, and how the brain works, and we get these messages and so forth. And by asking a question takes us out of primitive brain and puts us into evolved brain. Primitive brain is the punishing brain. Just think of primitive brain punishing. That's how we want to get back at others, make others feel the way we want to feel and so forth. It's the reactionary type of the brain. In order to get out of the primitive brain, we have to ask a question. That means we're engaging in evolved brain or rational brain, logical brain, reasonable brain. And it always starts by asking a question. So, what am I telling myself about the situation? I'm asking a question. So 2, you got to ask yourself, well, what pisses me off, to make it for short and simple. Make a list of the triggers and provocations and then decide in advance that what you're going to do when they occur. 98% of the stuff that happens to us that angered us in the past is going to anger us in the future. The only thing different is that in the future means it's a different time, tonight, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. It'll be in a different place, home, work, traffic, at Walmart. And it'll be a different person, significant other, child, friend, neighbor, coworker. But the act of you choosing to get upset, get pissed off, is always going to be the same. So it's important to understand what your triggers are and realize that I'm going to react like this all the time unless I change. Because let's say, for example, you're 25 years old and you're going to die at 75, all right? So that gives you 50 years of practicing these tools. And this is what I emphasize to my clients and everything. So this stuff is going to happen. So let's prepare now how to deal with it. So we decide in advance what to do. 3, this is where visualization and creating avoidance strategies becomes a powerful anger management tools. It takes a lot of work to do this stuff, but the work you do now pays off for those, like, say, 50 years. Okay, so it's important that we practice doing this, and that visualization is a very powerful technique that I use to teach people how to be pissed off properly. So PCAC. Primary cause of anger and conflict. It's unmet needs and expectations. I tell people what I do for a living. I say, well, I teach anger management, so I teach people how to be pissed off properly. And they kind of laugh and say, oh yeah, I know some people that do that. I even had my doctors do that when I go on an appointment. I got my shirt on with my logo on and stuff. Everyone knows somebody that could use it, you know. And then they say, some people will ask, well, why do people get pissed off? Why do they get so angry? And I said, you know, there's a lot of reasons, a lot of triggers. But if I had to narrow it down to one finite answer, it's because of unmet needs and expectations. Okay? Think about a recent anger event. Ask yourself, what did I need? What was I expecting? Okay, evolved brain question. It means you're becoming rational, logical, contentive, contemplative, and so forth. So we're going to find out is it was the unmet need and expectation, or our thoughts about those events, that got us upset. Here's how it works. When our needs and expectations are not being met, the brain refers to its historical rapport, meaning your memories and references of past similar experiences that deal with a trigger or provocation. So I already got this information stored, and if you remember Dr. Helmsetter's video on self-talk, is that we were programmed. So ever since we've been little kids, we've been programmed. So the brain chooses the most conveniently frequently programmed, or tools I like to call them, to deal with the trigger or provocation. When the brain chooses bad tools, the results turns out to be bad. And when the brain chooses good tools, the situation usually turns out good. So remember, the bad tools, good tools, all been programmed in us. When we get angry, we just have this habit of picking out the bad tools to express our anger. So the outcome is always based on the quantity and the quality of the programmed tools stored in one's toolboxes. This is why some people can let things, you know, just like water be on the duck's back, you know, just fly off, you know, just ignore stuff, and why some people can go off on somebody right away when they're both said the same thing. It's a matter of what you say to yourself when an event happens. Some people, you know, are just more are relaxed when they hear things like that. Some people jump the gun. It's just the way they were programmed. So in other words, anger is a habit. We need to teach people better habits or tools on how to be pissed off properly. So tip number 4, know your expectations and needs. And this comes primarily in, this primarily comes to know what your expectations and needs are, to learn the most of the time that they're high, that our needs and expectations are high, and we use these needs, we need to adjust these expectations and needs, especially when dealing with children and significant others, co-workers, and so forth down the line, that we may need to adjust them. Sometimes they're just way too high, and that we got to come back on ourselves and say, maybe I can lower my expectation. It doesn't hurt to lower them, but what we need to do is we need to understand what they are, and sometimes ask ourselves, because of why? Because of the programming we've received all our life. Mitchell's Toolbox. Mitchell's ACE training is about teaching people how to use new good tools to manage their anger. The toolbox metaphor states that the more tools you have in your toolbox, the quicker, easier, and healthier you can manage the provoking situation. For example, to remove a tight 1/2 inch hex nut bolt that is stuck, I can use my fingers, which is a tool. I could use a pliers, a tool, a vice grip, another tool, a crescent wrench, an adjustable wrench, or a socket wrench. All these tools will probably remove the bolt, but which tool would make the task easier and quicker to accomplish? So what I do is I use this metaphor to help people understand that they can pick the tools of anger management to deal with their situations better. So this toolbox metaphor is designed to give people the idea that these new tools will manage their anger more effectively, as their current toolbox does not contain sufficient good anger management tools. Remember the programming we received all through our lives. It is filled with bad anger management tools, which are the only tools they know how to use when angry or upset. Therefore, I tell my clients this: you are not a bad person. You are a person with bad anger management tools. I asked the question, if you had better tools to use in an angry situation, would you choose the better tools? And sometimes you see the look in their face and the expression on their face, and then I say to them, well, would you use better tools if you had them? Well, yes, of course I would. They respond. Then I ask them, well, then why aren't you using them? They respond, I don't know. I guess I don't have them, or I don't know how. My job is to give them the good tools to manage their anger more effectively. So therefore, a lot of you guys might be familiar with this young man, Abraham Maslow. One of my favorite sayings is, when the only tool you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. The reference is this: when you only got one tool to deal with stuff, you pound the heck out of it. So you see there, what we need to do is we need to respond to our tools a little bit more effectively. People operate with the only tools that are in their toolbox. The more tools they have to choose from, the better, faster, easier they can fix the problem. Bad tools equals limited problem-solving skills. Good tools equals maximum problem-solving skills. Therefore, 1, when dealing with a person with limited tools, ask yourself this question. Now, what I'm doing here is saying is, a lot of times the things that get us angry, upset, is the other person gives us an event for us to choose to get upset about, okay? Sometimes the other person is already upset, so we're going to kind of put ourselves in the other perspective here, or put their shoes on for a little bit and just say to ourselves, if this person is coming at me in an aggressive, angry way, why are they doing that? Well, one of the reasons they're doing that is because they're limited in their tools. Understanding this concept helps us maintain our composure better and not react or respond as violently or upsettingly to these other people. So when dealing with a person with limited tools, ask yourself this question: if he or she had better tools, would he or she choose to use them? Evolve brain question again. Rational, logical thinking question. The answer is yes. Then you ask a question, then why doesn't he use them? And the answer is, don't know how. They don't have them. So what we have to do is we got to stop expecting, PCAC, primary cause anger and conflict, stop expecting other people to use their good tools if they do not have them or do not know how to use them. You use them. Rule: it takes less energy to change myself than to change the other person. And so then sometimes it's when our children basically, or especially those you guys that got teenagers, so you can understand what teenagers are like in our lives with them and so forth, is that it takes less energy to change my attitude and my belief and my concepts about them than them, because they're operating with the only tools in their toolbox, which you as a parent probably have been programming all their lives. And you wonder where they learn this stuff, why they do this, and so forth and so on. So sometimes asking this question is a very powerful tool, is just say, gee, if they could respond better, would they choose to do so? Yeah, well, why don't they? They don't know how. Stop expecting them to give me the answer I want. I have to use the energy to help through the situation. So what are some bad tools or some good tools? I got a list here for you what bad tools and good tools are. Now it's just a generic list here, but a lot of you are familiar with them. Some typical bad tools are yelling and screaming, swearing, name calling, hitting, threatening, pointing, talking in a mean tone, criticizing you, or interrupting you. These are just a few of the bad tools. And I do in my clients, I give them, after I give them this little presentation about my toolbox metaphor, I assign them homework and I say, I want you to go out and list as many bad tools that you have used or have been used against you in your life. And then I want you to list as many good tools. When they come back and we go over this presentation with them, all these bad tools are pretty much listed, but hardly any of the good tools are listed, meaning that they've been programmed with more bad tools than good tools over their lifetime. And these are the pretty typical ones that get people upset and angry about things. Now, what are some of the good tools? And I'll be covering these in the presentation today. Some of the good tools are Mitchell's composure steps. These are steps that I created after 30-some years of being in the business. How can I get it a real simple, concise, easy way for people to manage themselves better? So I developed this thing called composure steps. Assertive communication, we're all pretty familiar with assertive communication using I statements and so forth. Filtering the big D is another technique I teach people. Big D, D stands for delivery. It's how we react to a person's delivery that usually sets us off. We got to learn how to filter out that delivery and ask ourselves, if he was okay, not so angry, what's he really trying to say, type of thing. Active listening. Deep breathing, #1 tool taught in any counseling, any practices. You got to breathe, you got to breathe. Relaxation response, this is a long-term tool. In my experience in teaching my clients relaxation and meditation is easy to teach them, very hard to get them to do it because they don't see the value in it until they practice it enough. But it's an effective tool. Taking a time out, the old go-to one. But I teach people to take a time out only after their other tools have not worked for them, or they get sideswiped or blasted with a hardcore anger situation where the only tool they use is a timeout to get away from it. But technically, I tell them use timeout as a last resort type of thing. RUS-A, this is an acronym I use for some people depending on what's going on. I'll be covering that a little bit, the acronym for that. And of course, the good old positive self-talk tool that we need to have. Positive self-talk is the basis of all our thinking. So tip number 5, use your good tools. When someone is upset with you, you ask, gee, if he or she had better tools, would they choose to use them? Ah, evolved brain again. Answer, yes. Then ask yourself, well, why isn't he using the good tools? Why are they being so difficult, so obnoxious, so rude, crude? Well, the answer is they don't know how or don't have them. I have to use my good tools. So we got to stop expecting others to use good tools, assume they don't have them, and use your good tools. So a lot of times we get upset with other people because they're rude, crude, mean, and vulgar. Well, people aren't intentionally like that. They're programmed like that. So we decide to take offense to that, which means we're showing our prudeness or our how should I say, our ability to deal with situations type. But anyways, what we do is we're expecting people to act a certain way. When they don't, we get upset. Well, they're giving us the only tools that they got. So I got to be more flexible. I got to accept the fact that people are just that way, and that's just the way the world works. Costs of anger. There's 5 costs of anger. I added a 6th. Although anger can be positive, at times it more frequently leads to harmful consequences. In its most extreme form, it can result in road rage, domestic violence, child abuse, physical assault, and even murder. According to Dr. Tony Fiore and Eri Novick, as explained in their acclaimed book, Anger Management 21st Century, the following is their 5 major costs of anger. First cost of your anger is your health. Believe it or not, if you don't get your act together, the years of explosive anger will create in high blood pressure, aneurysms, and so forth. A lot of times if you go to a doctor and you say, doctor, this is bothering me, this is bothering me, and you got these problems, so you get your medications for it. But the doctor never asks you, well, what's been going on in your life? Are you getting along with people okay? What are your reactions to your boss or coworkers and stuff? And then the long-term effect is our health gets affected by our outbursts of anger. Self-esteem, we choose to be our self-esteem. Anger destroys it to the most, so we use anger as a pushing away emotion because we don't like what we're feeling at that time. Our relationships, I would say lately, the last 10 years, 80% of the clients I get referred to me are people that are ruining their relationships with their anger, either significant others or their wives, okay? Boyfriends, girlfriends, and so forth. You know, they're given the ultimatum, get help or get out. Your children, we know all about that. Children are the byproducts of what their environment, they don't know. They think that the way they see mom and dad act or interact is just the way the world works. They go out and start acting like that, and then they get into trouble. And the last cost is, of course, the workplace. We take the stuff from home to the work, and many people can lose their job. Now, these are things I go over briefly with my clients because they really don't give a rip about these costs, except for this cost, money. In my experiences, this is the number one cost of anger that most of my clients understand. Because we talk about how much is a divorce nowadays, how much is the cost of repairs of throwing the cell phone, punching a hole in the wall, how much did it cost me to retain an attorney, $2,000, $3,000 just off the get-go, court costs. Now, if you're on probation, you got to pay a fee to be on probation, mandatory groups or programs. You get sent to my program, you got to pay me, fines or restitution, etc. I used to have a couple people work for me in this program, and we sat down one day and talked about the cost of anger. We came to the conclusion after doing some simple math that the average cost of anger is about $20,000 per person. I've had clients that their anger has cost them the millions already, okay? So these are just based on my observations, but this one hits home the most with people. So in summary, uncontrolled anger can adversely affect your health, self-esteem, relationships, the emotional well-being of your children, and your productivity at work and finances. On a more extreme scale, it can lead to such undesirable behaviors as road rage, domestic violence, child abuse, physical assault, and even murder. And these are the types of people I usually deal with on a regular basis. So tip number 6, know the cost of your anger. Think about it. Is it worth it? Mitchell's Anger Management Basics, How to Be Pissed Off Properly tools. So here's a summation of the things I teach. This is usually what I do when I run a group or something. After a couple sessions, I will rewrite my curriculum, not rewrite it, I'll use what I think the group needs as a whole. Sometimes I get groups that are more aggressive than others, more passive, so forth and so on. So I use a variety of tools, and I also believe in teaching people a variety of tools in a group setting. Gives them all an opportunity to pick a couple tools that would help them out in the long run. So one of the first tools you got to know, I already emphasized this, is you got to know your triggers and provocations. Second tool is utilizing the strategy called the avoidance strategy, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, but it's a way of pre-seeing our anger and programming our brain how to avoid the consequences of it. The third thing I teach them is composure steps, which is I like to call my earmark, my most productive component of my anger management training is teaching people how to be composed. Cognitive strategies, what's a good anger management program without cognitive strategies? I was involved in cognitive intervention skills, criminal thinking skills, all kinds of things in my whole career, and I was able to decipher through it all and try to to present this to most of my clients in an easy, simple way, because basically, to tell you the truth, my experience is teaching cognitive strategies is a bore, but it's very powerful. You got to fight through the boredom of it, okay? Communication skills and assertiveness. It's a simple way of expressing how we feel about events there. And the good old technique of taking the time out, and then I also have a bunch of miscellaneous tools I'll talk about in a little bit. So, tool number 1, Triggers, provocations. What are triggers? Triggers are things that are said or internally or externally or done that activates the response. Somebody, the bullet doesn't come out of the gun until you pull the trigger, okay? So it's your thoughts about things that trigger your anger. Everything starts with a thought. It's how you're programmed, how your thoughts were programmed through your life that gets through that. So know your triggers. The important thing to do is to know your triggers. Okay, so I know my triggers, so how about a little trigger prevention? How does this work? Question, what have you done to prevent a negative reaction to your trigger? Have you thought about that? Why do I always act like that? Why do I always get so upset when my husband does this, my wife does this, why do I always do that? Have they worked? No, but you keep getting frustrated. You keep doing the same old thing. You know, it's the old definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. We do this on a minimal basis a lot of times. Some people, this is the way of living for them. So what have you done about it? If what you've tried hasn't worked, try something different. You need to decide how to react to your triggers and how you're going to respond to them. This is where most people have difficulty in accepting anger management tools and training, okay? People in general reject new and different. We're taking them outside their comfort zone, and it's a natural reaction to reject that. My job, our job, is to convince people to expand their comfort zone and to convince them to open up their comfort zone and accept new and different tools and techniques to manage themselves better and expand their newly learning tools. So therefore, one simple way to do it is, if we stay away from the trigger, we stay away from anger. We are at the mercy of anyone who provokes us. Quotation by Newton Hightower. Tool 2, avoidance strategies. Avoidance strategies are another way to help identify provocations. Avoidance strategies are a creative way of getting results you need while bypassing the provocation. It's like taking a detour around construction. Hey, you're going on a trip, all right? And you want to figure out the quickest way to get there, but you see, like, you know, people don't like travel. They go south, they don't want to go through Chicago. So some people, like I actually did, would go through, I would avoid it. I'd go through Rockford, Illinois, take the western route, and then cut across, all right, to avoid all the tolls and the traffic and so forth and so on. So by pre-planning, all right, how can I avoid traffic, paying tolls? I got to pre-plan it. What do I need to do that? It's not a running away emotion or strategy. It's a strategy to pre-see provocations and how to avoid or deal with them when possible. So to develop an avoidance strategy, we simply write down our most frequent provocations. Below the provocations list, we list different ways that you can still get what you need without having to confront the provocation, or how to escape the situation before it becomes provoking. Once you decide on a strategy, you got to use visualization to help you confront the provocation without losing control. So here's an example of how to do that. How to use the avoidance strategy. Directions. This is a handout I use with my clients, and it gets pretty entertaining sometimes in how to do this. And what it is just giving them another way to, it's an alternative way to react and respond to provoking situations besides their typical way that gets them in trouble. So directions, think of some provocations you experienced in the recent past. List them below. Write an avoidance strategy for confronting the provocation. Then use visualization to deal with the provocation. The quality time you spend doing this activity will pay off a big time in your future. Here's an example, provocation, one of my favorite ones. You come to group without your assignments finished. The instructor loudly criticizes you in front of the other group members and threatens to kick you out of group. So, what's your avoidance strategy? Well, the most common answer is have my work done. Yeah, but you don't have your work done. So how can you avoid getting criticized and threatened to get kicked out of the group? Well, don't show up for the group. That's an avoidance strategy. Or come to group early and ask the other people in the group if they got their homework done and copy their homework. That's an avoidance strategy. Or come in and say, hey, Mitch, I screwed up. I didn't do my homework. That'll prevent a big criticism and everything like that. So the idea is that it's mindstorming ways to get out of a provocation. And it's a 2-page handout I give these people an assignment. It's quite entertaining sometimes to see the results, but the result is they're learning alternative ways to think and react to situations, the definition of anger management. Composure steps. This is this is my final exam when I give my anchor program. My program is an educational and cognitive-based program. I'm a special education teacher by trade, and so I use a lot of educational techniques in teaching anger management. One of them is this a composure step. So composure steps. Composure is a state or feeling of being calm and in control of oneself. This technique is what I stress and emphasize the most to all my classes or individual clients, and they got to memorize this. They got to know it like the back of their hand, because they're not going to leave my program with a folder full of handouts and say, oh, wait a second, I got to refer to my folder to in order to how to deal with you. Now it's got to be etched in the old brain. We got to reprogram the brain. Okay, so first step, I teach them how to breathe properly, the technique of deep breathing and so forth. We practice it, and so now they got to say to themselves, stop, breathe. Getting upset won't help. Now, while they're doing this breathing technique, they start saying these things here. They ask the big question: what do I need right now to be okay and healthy in the long run? This is the main question that gets us out of punishing brain, primitive brain, into evolved brain. What do I need right now to be okay and healthy in the long run? Okayness is reasonable. What do I need right now to be reasonable? What do I need right now to be relaxed, flexible? What do I need right now to have a balanced state of mind, responsible for my feelings? Well, I advocate and I teach this. The first thing that's going to help me, what I need right now to be healthy in the long run, is I need to say my self-talk statements. Those lists I told you earlier in the program, my 3 personal self-talk statements are: fix the problem, not the blame; attack the issues, not the person; I'm responsible, I'm responsible, I'm responsible. Now, all these techniques are designed to block the negative habitual things that come in and hijack our brain. These are designed to push those away and get us in a focus, in a positive focus here. Remember, we're deep breathing and we're saying these things to ourselves. The fourth thing is I teach is called Mitchell's Law. And there's no law that says I have to open a can of whoop ass right away. Now, this is a very provocative type of statement and everything, but let's substitute whoop ass here. So I go over this with my clients. I say, there's no law that says I have to open a can of arguing right away. There's no law that says I have to open a can of threatening right away. There's no law that says I have to open a can of swearing right away. So you get the idea? So whoop ass are all those bad tools I listed earlier. But we grew up, we were programmed that these are the things we have to do right away. And I just kind of, appeal to people, say, hey, where's it written that says you got to be a jerk right away? You're good at that. Let's put being a jerk on the back burner. Let's try something new and different, like using some anger management tools. And if they don't work for you, go ahead, go be the jerk. But then be ready to suffer the consequences of being a jerk. Your choice. I mean, what else can you tell them? Next thing they got to do is they got to learn that I got to change my response. So I have them say, change my response, I change the outcome. Nothing starts until you open your mouth. Think about the last times you got angry, upset. How many of the times, or you've seen other people get angry, upset, how many times have it started with somebody opening their mouth or responding to a provocation or trigger in a poor way? So we got to teach ourselves, I change my response, I change the outcome. I need to respond, not react, and that's a big problem we all do. And the last one is they got to ask themselves, gee, if he or she had better tools, would he or she choose to use them? Well, yes, of course. Why don't they use them? Well, they don't know how. So So I got to stop expecting others to use good tools, and I got to use my good tools. So does that make sense out there? Just ask this evolved brain question. If he had better tools, would he choose to use them? Yes. We're pushing away the pre-stored, habitual, negative, angry things that we used to say, and we're reprogramming them with these 5 simple steps, which takes quite a while. I have a handout in each one of these things, and we discuss them, and we practice them, we role play them, we memorize them until the cows come home. 4th tool I teach, cognitive strategies. Now, I teach an in-depth cognitive component to my program, okay? And what I'm presenting here, so this is just a sampling of what a good cognitive strategy would look like. But contact me if you want more information about cognitive strategies and techniques here, because I do base a lot of the work I do with them. I just didn't have enough time to get in this presentation. So here's just a real simple version of it. First thing we need to do is monitor our automatic thoughts. That's our triggers and provocations. Keep a log. They're not any good until you write them down. When you write them down and see them, you can have you can see more of the impact that happens. Now I got to question whether those automatic thoughts are mine or someone else's, what are called quotation collections. You know, as growing up, I saw my dad working on a car, and he dropped a tool and he says, "Oh, God damn it, I'm such a klutz." Well, me, a kid, not knowing what that meant, I thought that was kind of cool. My dad said it, so therefore I start saying it when I drop things. So that's how we collect these things. So we got to question, are these thoughts, beliefs I have about things, they're mine, or are they someone else's? So we need to correct our cognitive distortions, and we need to question the logic of these thoughts here, and we usually do that by something called counterpunching. We gotta know what our distortions are, and we're gonna always experience them, but we're gonna stop them from doing any more further damage, and we gotta counter them or counter punch them. And that's by having proactive self-talk. And then we need to strive for favorable connotations, see things in the most favorable way, realizing that there's always 2 sides to a coin. There's always good sides and bad sides, so forth and so on. So these are simple, basic strategies. I get into the the core of them, and that's coming up here in a second here. So there's 3 things we need to focus on when we catch ourselves talking negatively or distorting ourselves. I define distortion as a lie. I tell people you're distorting that story. I say to them, so you're lying. You're lying to yourself. So I use the word lying when I teach the word distortion or distortions. Okay. First thing we need to do is when we catch ourselves talking negative to ourselves, we say cancel, cancel, and replace that thought or distortion by saying to ourselves something positive or uplifting, like our self-talk statements. You want to change the negative into a positive, and we cannot remove something without replacing it with something. So we got to remove the negative statement. If we don't remove the negative statement and replace it with a positive statement, a new negative statement will come in. Why will a new negative statement come in? That's how we were programmed. We got to reprogram. So when an event happens, we just say, or we have a negative thought, we just say to ourselves, cancel, cancel, replace. So when someone, yourself, puts you down or criticizes you, you might say to yourself, no matter what you say or do to me, I'm still a worthwhile person. I teach this to my grandkids and other people. I tell them, teach your kids to say this. It's the old sticks and stones slogan that goes on with a lot of people. So no matter what you say or do to me, I'm still a worthwhile person. Because a lot of times when somebody criticizes us and you got low self-esteem, we believe that to be true, especially it comes from loved ones. Another way to help focus on this is every day recall the success you had in life. Close your eyes and picture the time you experienced success, like getting your driver's license, like making the basketball team, the football team, or getting in band, or being selected to homecoming, or something. Think of a positive experience that you had and realize that you do have successes in your life, okay? And so then we got to feel those feelings, and we got to go out in the world feeling those feelings the way they happen to us. And an important category here, important thing to remember is that how you speak to yourself, how you speak to other people, you will speak to yourself. And how you speak to yourself, you will speak to other people. Here's some cancel, cancel, replace examples. When an unwanted negative thought or distortion occurs, CCR, I call it cancel, cancel, replace. 1, you might catch yourself saying, I hate this job. Well, you catch yourself saying that negative thing, you say to yourself, cancel, cancel, replace that thought, and then you replace it with a thought like, this job can be difficult at times, but most of the time it's all right. There's probably more BS in other jobs. Or another example, you might say to yourself, he's a frickin' jerk. Cancel, cancel, replace with, he's not really a jerk. I'm just upset because I'm behind in my other work. I better kick it into high gear and get going. Now these also can be, they're considered as counterpunches in the cognitive distortion realm. Another one, she's so damn frustrating. Urgh. You catch yourself saying that because we're always going to have the negative thought. The idea is to catch it, okay? If we don't catch it, it leads into a string of negative thoughts and expletives and so forth. One of my favorite saying is, I probably should have it as a slide here, but you might want to write this down, is this: you cannot stop the thought. You can stop the effect it has on others or yourself. You cannot stop the thought. Once I had the thought, it's thought. But I can stop the effect. I can say, oh, geez, I shouldn't have said that. Now I could switch to more positive, productive thoughts, or I can continue on with a stupid tirade of things. So back to 3. She's so damn frustrating. Cancel, cancel, replace. We say, hey, if she had better tools to express her frustrations with me, would she choose to use them? Yes. She's just trying to make things better for us. So, primary anger distortions to avoid. These are the primary distortions that angry people have. There's a whole list of distortions we as humans engage in on a regular basis, but when angry, these are the top 5. First one is blaming. Believing other people are intentionally doing bad things to us. I don't get the job because you didn't help me, is an example. Next one is called destructive labeling. It's using inflammatory negative judgments about people whose behavior you don't like call somebody a jerk or an idiot or a dumbass. The third distortion is imperatives. Imperatives are my commandments about how others should or shouldn't behave. And the offenders are should, ought to, need to, got to, have to, must. So whenever we're using those words, we need to counterpunch those. Okay? Next one is magnifying. Everyone knows what that is, making a mountain out of a molehill. Words, examples of magnifying is everybody, nobody, awful, terrible. We're magnifying. Everyone's going to be there? Everybody you know? No, that's aren't you. Maybe most people will be there, but not everybody. And the last one is mind reading. It's jumping to conclusions, assuming, telling yourself that other people are thinking or feeling without their saying so. I know they think this. She doesn't like me. He doesn't care about me. I know. Never use the word no, think, or thought, though it's a perfect indicator that a mind read is about to happen. So be very careful with these things. And I go in in-depth detail with these 5 distortions in my program that teach people how to do it. Again, all these are triggering thoughts. These are triggering thoughts. Next tool I teach, tool number 5, communication assertiveness skills, basic stuff. IFF or the I feel formula. Teach I messages or I statements. Fill in the blanks. I feel upset when you don't call me. I want you to call me if you're going to be late because I can make other plans. Okay. You can use when you, I feel. You can switch these around if you want, but the idea is that we stay the I message. We're not attacking. Another technique called listen, reflect, assert. Listen attentively, nod. We're showing people that we're interested. We reflect or we state what the other person has said, and then we assert by using an I statement. So this is just another technique that I'll teach people. RUS-A, I mentioned this earlier before, is a good tool. It's an acronym for R stands for relax. So you're telling yourself this, relax. Take long, deep breaths. Use positive self statements. I am. Strategize before I act or talk. plan what I want to say to the other person, and acknowledge my feelings and the feelings of the other person. So this is just another tool or device or technique, however you want to call it, to help people manage themselves better. Al Erksby. Al Erksby is an active listening technique. It's just an acronym for the following words. L, A-L stands for active listening. E, encourage, nod, say, I'd like to know more about that, or restate what you hear by saying, so what you're saying is, reflect, I can see you're very upset. You reflect the feelings the other person has, or it sounds like you're annoyed or disappointed. Then clarify, could you give me a little more detail? What do you mean when you say this? But never ask why. Why is a dirty three-letter word. Stay away from why in a conflict situation. Okay, don't ask why. Email me or call me, I'll tell you why. Then after you go through these four, and you could loop these four until you get down to the point where you summarize. What I hear you saying is, so the main problems we're having are, and the last one is called validating. I'm really glad we're talking. I appreciate your help, so forth and so on. Again, this is a detailed activity we go through. We practice this. They got to know this. They got to memorize it. That's just the way I am with people. All right, the old famous timeout. Timeout is what you give yourself when you physically remove yourself from the setting, leaving before a verbal or physical altercation, not after something hurtful has happened. We're all familiar with that. So this person leaves before he or she damages property, others, or self. Rather than losing it, individuals take appropriate timeouts, establish to themselves that they can indeed control their anger enough to get out of trouble. When you remove yourself from what appears to be the stimuli, you're doing something that distracts you from the rage, as well as make a commitment to return to the other person using the triggered or rage only after you've regained control. Timeout can be viewed as responsible action which prevents irresponsible ones. Timeout tips. This is a technique I teach. You've got to memorize. We practice this, we role play this. Give the T sign. Then you say, quote, I'm beginning to feel angry. I want to take a timeout. You leave the situation for an hour, if possible, or take a creative timeout. A creative timeout is if you're in a restaurant, in a car, at a family gathering, you can't take off for an hour, you take off for a brief period of time. It's the act of leaving that is powerful. You do something constructively physical to spend some of the energy that you're feeling from the anger episode that caused you to take the time out. And then when you return, you say to yourself your composure steps, which I related to earlier, and then you say to the activator, the person is, hey, I realize part of the problem we're having is my fault, can we talk? This statement is very powerful because what it does here is, if you are 1% in error, at fault, when you take responsibility for that and let the other person know, they appreciate you more, they accept it more. So it doesn't make any difference. People think it's never their fault. Well, I got news for you. There's always support. You're there, it's part of your fault for being there. I realize part of the problem we have is my fault, can we talk? So we talk. You use the I feel formula, listen, reflect, assert, or Russ A technique to talk to them. Then we engage in active listening to demonstrate that we actually listened and we cared about what they're doing after using these 6 steps above. And then, to understand the basic premises, the key to taking a timeout is to take practice timeouts. As often as possible, make it easier to take a real timeout. So what I teach my clients is, okay, you're sitting around with your significant other, watching TV, a commercial comes up. So you say to yourself, hey, timeout, practice timeout. I'm beginning to feel angry, I want to take a timeout. Go in the kitchen, get a drink of water or something, you come back, and then you go through these steps. Or if you're out hanging out in the yard by the fire pit or something, you say, hey, practice timeout. The more you practice, the better you get. It's the old adage here. This here I use to teach to my ragers or people that are really hardcore, and they basically got to memorize and do these 15 things. And this takes a little bit of time to teach them this, but they got to memorize it. And these are very basic techniques here, but I have a long paragraph that goes with each one. But this will just give you the gist here. We need to abstain. When angry, we need to abstain from speaking because it's our mouth that gets us in trouble. Shut up. Stop staying. A lot of times we stay and glare. That provokes the other person. Get out of Dodge. Stop staring. Oh, You know what it's like to be stared at, the uncomfortable feeling, right? Well, when we're angry, we're throwing darts, missiles out of our eyes. Stop interrupting. One of the basic things we do when we're angry. We never give the other person a chance to say anything. We constantly interrupt. Cursing always sets off somebody's anger. Name calling, another one. Stop threatening. Stop pointing. You point your finger at them. That's another thing. We learn all these things. Remember, we're programmed for all these things. Stop yelling, raising your voice, or talking in a mean tone. Stop being sarcastic. Stop mocking. Stop throwing things, slamming doors, or banging on walls, and so forth and so on. Stop all non-affectionate touching. It happens quite a bit. Stop sighing, clucking, or rolling your eyes. That's a big one. You want to let me know you're pissed off or irritated with me? Just roll your eyes on me. Boy, you'll get some daggers out of me. And the last one is stop criticizing and stop lecturing when you are upset. So, in summary, my good tools are fingertip, my ACE goal statement, anger management is, all these things I teach my people. These are all handouts. These are all discussion things. All right, there's 21 of them there. I have more, but these are certain things. Depending on my audience, the people, I decide which ones they'll benefit the most from, and they pick up with it. A couple more slides to go here. I'll be all done to do a little Q&A if we have the time for that. And the last one I put down here is counterpunch distortions. This is a big one for people that have a lot of, these are for my criminal thinkers and people with low self-esteem and stuff. you gotta attack their cognitive distortions with that. Believe it or not, this is a very effective anger management tool. I use this for my more sophisticated clients, my maybe more educated clients and stuff. I get them to read the book, Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I'm just going to zap through this kind of quickly to give you an idea here. But if you take, I took these techniques and I apply them to anger management and they work fantastically, okay? So this could be how to win friends and influence people, or how to be pissed off properly. That could call this book. Okay, don't criticize, condemn, or complain. Give honest, sincere appreciation to other people. These are just the basic, the earmarks to this book. Arousing the other person and eager want to cooperate. How to get people to like me. Become genuinely interested in other people. Smile. A baby smiles at us, what do? Smile back. The dog is wagging his tail and jumping on us when we come home. What's he doing? He's smiling at us. Walk around with a smile. I used to take convicted felons, mentally ill inmates. We would practice this technique in our institution at the Wisconsin Resource Center. I would stop the class, we'd line up, and I'd make them with me walk down the hallways of our institution with a big smile on their face, and to observe the reactions they got from people walking by. And the typical reaction was people smiled back. Remember, the other person's name is, that person is the sweetest and most important sound in any language. Be a good listener, encourage others to talk about themselves, talk in terms of the other person's interests, make the other person feel important, do so. So, win the way of people, I'm just gonna flash through these quick. They probably, I believe, I could be wrong, I've been wrong before, the Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People is the second most selling book in the world behind the Bible. It's been translated into 17, 18 different languages. It's a powerful book, very powerful program. So this is not the end, but the beginning of how to be pissed off properly. Thank you for your time. I realize I went over a few minutes, but that's just the way the world works. I want to thank you, and it's time for questions and answers.
Yeah, thanks so much. We'll hang out for a few minutes if anyone still has questions. So please type those into the chat box and we'll get to those as they come in. We have one that's come in so far, asking why sometimes when individuals are confrontational, they're demanding an explanation or justification, which ultimately just puts them on the defensive. Some thoughts on that?
It's power and control. They've been programmed to act and react like that. Instead of asking an evolved brain question, they try to attack, and it's just the way they are. Our job is to take that question, and I mentioned before, one of the techniques, I probably should have covered this, it's a pretty profound technique, is filter the big D, is filter out the way they say it overlook the negative, the condescending, the rude, crude ways, and transform the words into, if they really weren't upset, what would they really be saying? Now that's an evolved brain question. You answer that question by using a good delivery. Delivery is our tone and tempo of our voice and our body language that's directed at other people. And we were programmed with deliveries ever since we were little kids. All my mother would have to say to me, Mitchell Lee, boy, and I knew I was in trouble. It was that tone of the voice and the tempo. And we were programmed. So that's why people, when they do that, it's the only tool in their toolbox. We got to understand, filter it out, ask the question, if they weren't so upset, what are they really trying to say? Majority of the time, you answer that question, they'll calm down. It's a power play, that's all it is.
All right, so we've got several more that came in. We'll try and get through relatively quickly since it's already after 2. The next one is, do you ever use humor as a tool, or would that be considered like disrespectful?
Humor is the #1 antidote to anger. I use humor as much as possible. In fact, in our program at the Wisconsin Resource Center, we actually taught a class on humor to inmates. You know, try to teach some schizophrenics and some antisocials humor techniques, but we actually had a class. Humor desensitizes the situation if used in the correct way and not sarcastically. But yes, I try to be humorous in every situation.
Next question is, what about people who feel that they aren't angered quickly?
Well, if they're not angered quickly, great for them. If they have a slow buildup to anger, what's happening with them is they could be having a lot of little anger issues that they tuck away, but they don't deal with. And then all of a sudden, it's like I call the volcano effect. You fill up the volcano with all these little irritants throughout the day, and then you come home from work and your wife or husband say, how'd you do, or, you know, how was work today? And you blow up on them. You have no idea why you blow up. So if you don't quick to anger, that's great, but you got to be careful. You got to be careful that you don't just tuck them all away, and it's called suppressed anger or repressed anger.
Next question is kind of how to respond to so much anger that's not in a direct way, such as social media, voicemail, email.
Turn it off. Or realize people have the right to have their opinion. It's too bad that their opinions are skewed, and don't take offense by it. But that's easier said than done. We all have our beliefs and our programs in us, and especially what's been happening lately in politics and everything, it's kind of hard. I go on Facebook and I get pretty sick and tired of it when I see some of the stuff on there. You know, most people use it as a bitch session, and we got to realize, well, people are complaining. Complaining means you just have a better idea how things should be. You just don't have a very good way of expressing it. Ignore it best you can. It's the other people's opinions. Remember, opinions are like ear holes. We all have a couple of them.
All right. What would you say is the best way to calm down a client who's angry and becoming aggressive? What would be the best approach to calm that type of a situation?
Talk in a softer tone of voice, make it hard for them to hear you. Tell them to breathe. If you've had some sessions with them, if you know they had anger management, remind them of the tools that they have. But the first thing to do is to delay your automatic response to them and just help them breathe. Just sit there, look at them. Don't stare at them, because that'll set them off some more. Just glance at them, look at them, breathe. If they're standing, you sit down, and you try to get them to mirror your body language there. But if they're really upset, and the other thing for you is to realize they're using the only tools in their toolbox. I need to filter out why they're so upset and get to the heart of it without reacting and responding to that overt behavior. That's the first thing I learned when I taught special education in the public schools. I taught ED kids. It's one of the things they taught us is they're giving us these surface behaviors because they don't have these skills to really express how they truly feel. So they give us these overt, negative, aggressive surface behaviors that hijacks us. As soon as we act like them, we are convinced them that we're just like them or we're not any better than them. So the last thing we want to do is act like them. So get them to breathe, relax, tell them you're willing to listen, as long as they can calm themselves down. If they don't do that, just say, sorry, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. When you're feeling a bit better, more calmer, come on back.
All right, just a few more. Information you shared about admitting that we are partially responsible is painful. It appears that some of our clients are already refusing to accept any responsibility and just blaming, us to begin with. And it feels like opening the door to further justifying their inability to accept responsibility or just being a doormat.
If you got a client that has a mental illness that is like that quite a bit, and admitting a fault, there's nothing wrong with admitting you're wrong with something. It's just the fact that, yeah, they could be opening the door to things, they could be hooking you, but now we're talking here about somebody who might have some antisocial tendencies or criminal thinking type tendencies that they would turn this back on you. If you have a lot of people that react like that, you should be pretty versed in how to deal with them. But majority of them are doing, again, they're acting with the best tools in their toolbox. If you could filter through it and ask yourself, what are they really trying to say, and answer that question, you'll get to the heart of the matter. People just have, especially in those types, have bad communication skills. They never learned the proper way to express themselves. So we take offense by it. Well, we got to give them the benefit of the doubt. Now, if it gets to the point where you feel endangered or threatened, well, then you got to take appropriate actions.
All right, and the last question is, how can we assist someone who just feels that this is just how they are?
How to assist somebody who feels just how they are?
Like that they're just an angry person, or that's just the way they are.
I get that quite a bit. That's just the way I am. And then you talk about the cost. Well, being like that, what has that cost you? And then you get them to talk about, does your family invite you to family functions anymore? Do you have any more friends? How many friends did you have before you chose this behavior? And how many friends do you have now? You got any acquaintances at work? You got any coworker? Then you talk about the cost. What does this behavior cost you? Now, some of them actually like being mean SOBs, and then that's just the way they are. Just let them be like that. We're in the business to help people. If somebody totally, truly feels they don't want any help, well, sometimes we may have to refer them to someone else that does that. I specialize in ragers and difficult people. I teach my stuff to developmental disabled people, to mentally ill, because I find it challenging and it just energizes me to try to help them all the more. So I think of ways to try to get them to change. But the only way to do that is through repetition and time, and sometimes we just don't have that luxury.
All right, well, thank you so much, Mitchell, for sharing all of this information and some tools and tips and tricks that we can use. And thank you to everyone who attended today and for sticking with us, even though we went a little bit long. As you exit, please make sure you answer the survey questions. That helps us with attendance, and so we can provide some feedback to our presenters, and have a great rest of the day.